Hello, and welcome to the Lore of Braunhaven. Today, we're going to talk about some of the optional rules that I use in the Braunhaven campaign setting. And some of these rules have been codified, such as the alternate rules on death. They can be found in the Skelos Mountains hardcover book. But uh, before we get into the alternate rules on death, you may have noticed that there are a couple of changes that I have made, or optional rules that I use for old school essentials in my games. If you watch our Braunhaven campaign that is going on this channel and the other show. And the first of those rules is that there is an optional rule in OSE for individual initiative. But I found that the optional rule for individual initiative in Old School Essentials is lacking in that it doesn't explain some things. So the standard rule is what we call party initiative. So each side rolls a d6, and the highest roll goes. And you know, if the party gets higher roll, then everybody in the party goes, and basically that's all this day. I'm assuming it's just a round robin. Um, and they also talk about that there's a face to the group, so he or a caller, and they basically discuss amongst themselves, and then he tells you what everybody is doing. I am not a fan of party initiative, and I've been playing D&D since '79, and I cannot remember any time that we've ever played using party initiative. And I started with the Moldvoy Basic Edition box set in '79-ish, '80-ish. No, it was '79. It was June of '79, and yeah, nobody I have ever played with played that way. I mean, sorry, Bronstein guys, but nobody that I have ever played with played that way. It's just, I don't know. It's just a weird way of playing to me. And none of the players in my groups, we tried it when we first switched over to Old School Essentials from 5th edition, and none of the players that I played with enjoyed it. So I have kind of expanded. They do have the optional rule of individual initiative, where it's roll a d6 plus or minus your dexterity modifier. That's great, but that's pretty much where the description of that ends, and it doesn't take some things into account. For instance, this of course is an optional rule as well. Slow weapons. So weapons that have the slow trait with party initiative means that if you're using a weapon that's slow, you get dropped to the bottom of the initiative stack. You go last. And that's all it says. So let's say my question then, of course, is, the optimal group size for an old school game is between 6 to 9 players, or at least 6 to 9 characters. Meaning that some of the players may be running 2 characters. And so the question is, if you have this guy over here who is using a polearm that has the slow trait, and this guy over here that is using a greatsword that has the slow trait, and they both get dropped to the bottom, and meaning that it doesn't say drop to the bottom, it says they go last. Well, if you've got 2 people that are going last, who goes last? What order do they go in? And it doesn't answer those questions. So I've kind of expanded on the individual initiative rules. Everybody rolls d6 plus or minus their initiative, and that is the order that they go in. Now, if you have a weapon with the slow trait, that immediately gives you a -1 to your initiative. And so far, that has worked out quite well. It takes into account that the weapon is slower than everybody else's, and everybody gets their own individual initiative, meaning that their dexterity bonus applies to their initiative. The other thing I do not do that seems to be standard, that everybody wants to rant and rave about, is re-rolling initiative every round. I find that tedious. Um, you can play the game however you want. I don't do it that way. I roll one initiative for the encounter, and we run through that. What I have found with my play group is that one, rolling initiative only once for the encounter speeds play up, and two, you're not really going to gain that much usually by re-rolling next round. There are some people that are going to, of course, claim that, well, if you had a bad initiative this round, you could get a better initiative next round. Usually not, because if you're rolling individual initiative, you probably got it's unlikely that you only got bad initiative or low initiative because of your bad dice roll. I mean, yeah, you might have rolled low, but usually what you're going to see is everybody's going to be close to the same order anyways, and so the average amount of times everybody's going to be, you might swap one or two players, but it's going to be close to the same. So I just don't see the point in it. And like I said, rolling once seems to move the game along much faster. It's less tedious, and I know my players like it better that way. At least that's what they've told me. So those rules I have not codified yet. They are not written down. I'm thinking I'm going to put the individual initiative rules probably in the next book, which is a treatise of magic and spells, which will be coming out fairly soon. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to have a whole bunch of new stuff in it. And old spells, new spells, old magic items, new magic items, all aimed at the Braunhaven campaign setting. And so the next set of rules, which are codified in the Skull's Mountains hardback, is alternate rules on death. So in basic and expert games, as well as the BECMI, basic, expert, companion, master, and immortals box sets, when you hit 0 hit points, you're dead. That's it. Your days of adventuring are done. Make up a new character. In first edition, I think it was first edition. It was pre 3.0. I know that. I think it was first edition. But in those at 0 hit points, you were just unconscious, and then you could take further damage, and at negative 10 hit points, you were dead. I feel that that's a little weird, because that is making the assumption that everybody, from your fighter, who is strong and robust, he's crepuscular, he's got, he eats red meat every night, he's got a healthy constitution. He has, at 0 hit points, he has negative 10 hit points. And then you have your magic user, who is frail, is a bookworm, he doesn't lift weights, he doesn't even lift, bro. And yet, at 0 hit points, he also has negative 10 hit points. That doesn't make any sense. So I've kind of split the difference and have made it, I have given you an opportunity to survive some of the deadlier attacks. So in the option that I've put into Braunhaven is that if a character is dropped to 0 hit points, the first thing that happens is they need to make a saving throw versus death. If they fail that roll, sorry, you're dead. Make a new character. If you have a shield and you succeed on that saving throw, the shield is splintered. It is absolutely obliterated. Now, if it is a magical shield, I would say that the shield probably gets knocked aside. I mean, if it is a particularly devastating blow, magical items can get a saving throw, and if it succeeds, then the shield is still intact. But if not, it is splintered, it is blown apart. And the character is knocked down and is unconscious at 0 hit points. They're not bleeding out, they're just unconscious. But this can lead to the enemy that just made that attack on his next round. He can, of course, come up and make a coup de grace attempt, and he gets to make an attack with a +4 bonus, and your shield's devastated. You don't get a shield bonus to your AC. So this can, of course, I have found led to some heroic moments where another player character can leap in to try to save the day from the bad guy, ending the downed character. So if you don't have a shield and you succeed on your death save, you are uh, very, very badly wounded, and you are unconscious, and you are in the process of bleeding out. And what this means is that each round you will take 1d3 con damage. And of course, when you reach 0 con, you're dead. You've bled out. You are done. Bleeding can be staunched with bandages. And of course, a cleric or somebody else can, of course, give you magical healing, or pour a potion down your throat, or pour a potion on the wound, however you would like to do that, which will, of course, stop it as well. And if there's magical healing that's done, and even with natural healing, any regained points has to go to the con loss first. And when the con is brought back up to where it should be, back up to its maximum score, or whatever the maximum for that character was, then those points can go to hit points. And the character is in a coma and is unconscious until their hit points are brought back to 1 or more. So if they are at 0, whether they're bleeding out or not is besides the point. They are in a coma. Now, if you are at 0 and bleeding out and taking con damage every round, bleeding can be stopped with bandages. Bandages can be purchased, and I highly recommend purchasing bandages, because these are bandages that have been, they're as sterile as they're going to get. I wouldn't say sterile. I would say they are at least clean. You can buy them as standard purchase items. And, bandages, a roll of bandages, I think there's 10 of them in a pack, or in a roll and bundle. And that can be used to staunch bleeding, and that will stop the con loss. And this can be done by any character. And everybody knows how to wrap a wound. Bandages can also be made if you are in a hurry or you don't have any bandages. You can cut or tear pieces of fabric off of your clothing or tents or your bedroll, what have you, and use that to bind a wound, which will stop the blood loss. Now, the downside of doing that and not using purchased clean bandages is that these bandages are likely to be gross and dirty. If you're tearing them off your clothing, especially true. This can be left up to the referee, but tearing them off your clothing is going to be especially true, because you have to figure that after even an hour of traipsing through the wilderness or a dungeon, usually worse in a dungeon, you are going to be rather gross. You are going to be covered in whatever filth is lying around the particular dungeon you're going in, and God forbid you're in a sewer. We always end up in a sewer at some point. You're also going to be covered in the blood and viscera of any monsters or enemies that you've killed. Melee fighting is going to be a dirty business. And so you are going to you're going to look like a butcher, and you're going to have it all over you. There's no such thing as a clean fighter. So cutting strips off of clothing and wrapping somebody's wound with it, or even wrapping your own wound, or having it wrapped on your own wound, is a terrible idea, because this can lead to infection. And so it does stop it does stop the bleeding. It does allow natural healing to start to occur. And as I said, regained points have to go to con loss first before they go to hit points. But each day that you are using those dirty bandages, there's a 1 in 6 chance that you'll develop an infection. And this is cumulative. So let's say that you have gone 3 days with dirty bandages, and every day that you have dirty bandages, you have to make a con ability check, and this is at your current con. So if you are in a coma at 0 hit points and you have lost 3 con out of, say, 8, so you're at 5, you're going to have to roll under 5, in adding your negative modifier to that roll, to get below 5 to succeed. If each day that you fail that check, there's a 1 in 6 chance. So if, let's say that you've gone 3 days wearing dirty bandages and you've failed every single day, um, that means that you're now at a 3 in 6 chance of developing an infection. Now, infections can be left up to the referee. The Old School Essentials doesn't really go too heavily into disease. That's another area I'm thinking about throwing in some optional rules for disease. Um, you know, giving it a little bit more depth. But it's pretty easy to figure out. I mean, you're talking about an infection, so you're talking about fever, ability and attack penalties, um, uh, you know, just all manner of things. This can go so far as to include limb loss. Now, and this, of course, as the referee decides, where a hit took place. Um, let's say that the referee described the downing wound as a leg wound. So if that leg wound is uh, is is infected, um, there's a really good chance that that leg at a certain point is just going to fall off, and usually that's going to happen in like 1d12 days. It can get so bad that in 1d12 days the character's just going to die from the infection. Period. There's no way that that's going to stop. It could, in order to stop the infection, this could mean amputating the limb. This could mean reopening the wound and literally cleaning it out, which sounds as unpleasant as it could possibly be. Um, and of course, if you have a cleric or somebody who has cure disease, that'll work too. But I wouldn't make it. If I were the referee, I wouldn't make it particularly easy. It's like a cure disease spell isn't going to be suddenly, oh, I'm better. No, it's going to, yes, the infection is dealt with, but now you have, 1d12 days of recovery time, and you just slowly start to get better over that period of time. So that's my alternate rules on death, and I created these rules because I was running the original stock rules out of Old School Essentials, and I really, don't get me wrong, I really love the fact that death is a very real part of this game. I do believe that the characters should be, and I don't want to say disposable, but there should be a real threat to the characters that you just simply don't get in 5th edition D&D. It just doesn't exist. But having said that, I did find that at the lower levels especially, that it did end up being a meat grinder. And I knew that this was going to be part of that situation simply because I've read through the rules and I know how my players are, and but I also told myself they're going to learn because you can't just charge in. You're going to have to think things through, and they have learned. But I think in the first 3 weeks, we killed 5 characters in one of the games. And when we started at OSE, I told everybody to make 2 characters. That way, you have the character that you're going to normally play, and then it is assumed that you have this other character who is trailing along, probably as a retainer. And in my one group, they ended up playing both characters simultaneously. Just to round out their numbers because we only have 3 players in that group. The other party is much larger. It fluctuates anywhere from 9 to 14 players. And so they just have a second character sitting in the back somewhere, usually sitting back at the inn or whatever, that they can say, okay, my character died, and I pulled him out. So yeah, in the first 3 weeks, we killed off 5 characters, and I decided that we need to soften the blow just a little bit. I mean, I think at 0 hit points, it's almost there. So I just kind of soften that. Now, like I said, these are optional. So use them, don't use them. It's up to you. But they are available in the Braunhaven campaign setting. Next time, we're going to go through some of the optional stuff that was thrown into the Skullus Mountains on your on temperature and how that can affect your character. And that leads, of course, into some of the additional equipment that was put into the Skullus Mountains that is really geared towards colder climates and mountain climbing. So thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time on the Lore of Braunhaven.